Welcome to the Clinical File. I'm John Cordray, and I'm a licensed professional counselor, and this is my mental health analysis of the Brian Walshe case. These are my speculations. It's not a diagnosis of anyone involved in this case. Have you ever wondered how early rejection from those closest to you might twist the way you see and trust relationships forever? Brian Walshe's story starts with a childhood that carried heavy emotional burdens, ones that could plant seeds for later struggles with honesty and connection. As a counselor, I often see how those foundational experiences shape adult behaviors in profound ways. Here's what we know about Brian's early years and why it matters in this case. Brian grew up in Massachusetts, the son of Thomas Walshe, a well-regarded neurosurgeon at Brigham and Women's Hospital. Court records paint a picture of a household where achievement was expected, but support felt conditional. Family friends later describe interactions laced with criticism, where Brian heard he was a disappointment or even unwanted many times. This kind of environment can foster deep insecurity. In my practice, clients with similar backgrounds often develop coping mechanisms like withdrawal or fabrication to protect themselves. For Brian, these patterns seemed to emerge early, setting a tone for how he navigated the world. The first psychological question here is, what if a need to prove worth through shortcuts becomes a lifelong habit? Brian's adult life showed a recurring theme of deception, starting with the financial schemes that escalated over time. In 2011, he legitimately sold 3 Andy Warhol paintings to a gallery in South Korea, but by 2016, he listed fake versions of those same pieces on eBay. And when the forgery came to light, authorities discovered Brian had retained the originals. This led to federal charges. From a mental health standpoint, such actions might reflect an ingrained belief that rules don't apply when survival or success is at stake. It's my speculation here, but repeated fraud could tie back to learning that truth brings pain, so bending it offers control. Brian pleaded guilty in 2021 to wire fraud, money laundering, and interstate transportation for a scheme to defraud. He received a sentence of 37 months in prison and was ordered to pay restitution. This was not isolated, however. Court documents revealed earlier accusations like stealing from his father's estate. These behaviors suggest a pattern where immediate gains outweigh long-term risk. As a professional, I note how this might indicate issues with impulse control or empathy toward victims. The next psychological question is, how does complete family cutoff signal deeper unresolved anger? Brian's relationship with his father deteriorated into total estrangement. Thomas Walshe accused Brian of mishandling funds in a real estate transaction involving nearly $1 million. They stopped speaking around 2008. When Thomas died in India in 2018 during a trip, his will explicitly disinherited Brian, leaving him only best wishes for a successful future without a financial inheritance. A family friend photographed the document before it disappeared. Brian later faced charges for destroying the will and looting assets, including art and jewelry and a Porsche, and even draining the bank accounts. He sold his father's apartment without authority to do so. In court records, Brian was called manipulative and prone to violence. This level of rift points to possible resentment built over years of perceived rejection. In mental health counseling, such breaks can stem from attachment wounds, making healthy bonds very difficult. People might lash out or withdraw to avoid further hurt. It's a form of self-defense. Brian's actions here could reflect a drive to reclaim what he felt denied emotionally. Here's another psychological question. Could a label like sociopathy explain a life of calculated risk without apparent guilt? Court findings from the estate dispute include statements that Brian spent time in Augustin Riggs Center, a psychiatric facility in Stockbridge, Massachusetts. There, he reportedly received a sociopathy diagnosis. While sociopathy is not a formal DSM term, It often refers to antisocial personality disorder traits, persistent disregard for others' rights, deceitfulness, and a lack of remorse. Brian's fraud history aligns with this. He victimized buyers and eventually family without evident regret. In my experience, individuals with these traits might view relationships transactionally, which prioritizes self-interest. This is not my diagnosis of Brian, but it does offer a lens for understanding potential motivations. Anna Walshe met Brian around 2014 while both worked in hospitality. She, a Siberian immigrant, built a career in real estate, and she showed resilience and ambition. They married in 2016 and had 3 sons by 2022. Yet early signs of strain appeared in the marriage. In 2014, Anna reported to Washington, D.C. police that Brian threatened to kill her during an argument. No charges resulted, but the incident documented the tension between them. From a psychological point of view, threats in intimate relationships often signal power dynamics that are gone awry. They might stem from a fear of loss, echoing past abandonments. In therapy, we explore how such outbursts indicate unmet needs or poor emotional regulation. Anna later wrote supportive letters for Brian's fraud sentencing, describing him as a devoted father working on his issues. She attributed his troubles to his childhood shame. This suggests a complex bond, perhaps with elements of hope or codependency. Partners sometimes minimize red flags, believing change is possible given time. What if the mounting external pressures push someone toward a breaking point? By late 2022, Brian faced sentencing for his fraud conviction. Under house arrest, he cared for the children while Anna commuted to D.C. for her job at a real estate firm. Financial strain loomed, with restitution owed. Prosecutors later revealed Anna had an affair with a colleague in D.C. She confided to a friend about planning to relocate there with the boys, leaving Brian. This potential betrayal could revive old wounds of rejection. In mental health, stressors like legal troubles combined with relational threats can heighten anxiety or even aggression. Individuals might react impulsively, seeing no other way out. Brian's history suggests that he coped through control and deception. On December 31st, 2022, Anna hosted a New Year's Eve dinner at home with Brian and a friend. She appeared happy, toasting to new beginnings. She was last seen alive early January 1st, 2023. Brian told police that she left around 6 a.m. for work and she called a rideshare. No evidence supported this, however. No ride records, no airport sightings. Instead, digital footprints told a different story. Here's a chilling question. Why would innocent confusion lead to searches on body disposal methods? Between January 1st and January 3rd, Brian used his son's iPad to Google phrases like, how long before a body starts to smell? What's the best hacksaw to use to dismember a body? And 10 ways to dispose of a dead body if you really need to. Over 20 searches focus on forensics and cover-ups. Psychologically, this could point to a dissociative state or calculated planning. In some cases, panic overrides judgment, but the specifics suggest awareness of consequences. As a counselor, I see how trauma responses might fragment thinking, yet these actions imply intent to conceal. Surveillance footage showed Brian buying supplies on January 2nd, tarps, buckets, mops, tape, and a hacksaw, totaling over $450. He wore a surgical mask and gloves, and he paid in cash. Later, at other stores, he purchased even more cleaners. This preparation hints at methodical cleanup. In the Walshe home basement, investigators found bloodstains matching Anna's DNA and a bloody knife with Brian's DNA and a hacksaw blade with Anna's DNA as well. No body was found, however, but in the trash bins were Anna's belongings, a necklace, clothing, and a COVID vaccine card. Behaviorally, this disposal method might reflect a belief in evading detection similar to his fraud schemes. It could indicate detachment, treating the situation as a problem to solve rather than a loss to grieve. On January 4th, Anna's employer reported her missing after she missed work. Brian filed a report as well, but inconsistencies in his statements led to an arrest on January 8th for misleading investigators. By January 18th, charges included murder and dismemberment, leading to an indictment for first-degree murder that came March 30th, 2023. Trial preparations dragged on, and in September 2025, an inmate stabbed Brian at Norfolk County Jail using a makeshift weapon. This assault led to a competency evaluation. The defense argued that his mental state had deteriorated, which delayed the trial. He spent 40 days at Bridgewater State Hospital, and then on November 14, 2025, a judge deemed him competent to stand trial. Proceedings began with Brian pleading guilty on November 18, 2025, to misleading police and improper conveyance of a human body. The murder trial opened on November 1, 2025, and the prosecutors presented evidence of the motive, Anna's affair, and plans to leave him. They detailed the brutal nature of the case, arguing premeditation. The defense claimed Brian found Anna dead, possibly from natural causes, and panicked due to his criminal history. They suggested he feared no one would believe him, and no witnesses testified for the defense. After just 6 hours, the jury convicted Brian of first-degree murder on December 15, 2025. Then sentencing followed on December 18, 2025, life without parole, plus consecutive terms for the other charges. The judge called the acts barbaric and incomprehensible. Here is the final psychological question. Does the apparent lack of remorse tie back to early emotional voids? Throughout the trial, Brian maintained his innocence on murder, though he did plead guilty on the lesser charges, which may show some admission, but his past schemes showed little regret for harm caused. The dismemberment and casual disposal were described in the court as devoid of humanity. Psychologically, this might link to empathy deficits, possibly rooted in childhood where feelings were dismissed. People with such traits often rationalize actions to preserve self-image. In letters, Brian expressed desire for growth and family. This duality highlights internal struggles. Anna's psychology deserves some attention here as well. She overcame challenges, moving from Siberia to build a better life. Friends saw her as strong and focused on her sons. Her affair might have indicated unmet emotional needs in marriage, but we may never know. Staying despite threats could reflect optimism or practical ties. Victims often weigh risk against stability. The children, now in state custody with a guardian, face profound loss. They likely grapple with parental absence. Grief in kids can manifest as confusion or behavioral issues. Support is vital for their resilience. Piecing together the clues for Brian, his childhood scars that led to deception habits, straining bonds, and stressors like fraud sentencing and betrayal amplified his anger and risk. Understanding the why involves layered factors. Relationships thrive on open communication, but this case reminds us to heed inconsistencies. As a counselor, I encourage seeking help for concerning patterns. Brian's path shows how untreated issues cascade. For Anna, it's a tragic loss of potential. Her story urges safety in partnerships, and her boys need nurturing and support in counseling for their trauma. This case has a lot of complexities, and with Brian, we look at his childhood, we look at how strict his father was, we look at how he had that verbal abuse, but I also want to point out that not everyone who has a childhood like Brian is going to turn out to be a killer. Is going to kill and control or deceive or commit fraud. But for Brian, that's where it led. And he received that diagnosis and had a personality disorder likely triggered from his childhood. Not excusing his behavior or what he did, but simply identifying the psychological and mental health indicators of this case. So what did you think about this case? Were there any elements that stood out to you? If you want more mental health analysis of true crime stories like this one, be sure to subscribe for more. And if you found this case compelling, be sure to watch this next story. It will make you more aware of your surroundings. Thank you for joining me today. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe.